Level 4 leadership is I'm the hero, I'm the firefighter, I'm going to champion, save the day. And they're the big ones, but they cause some of the problems. And then the level 5 leader is the person who organizes it, makes sure it's done right, makes sure that when things go right, their people get the credit. When things go wrong, they own it and they fix it. But they're less charismatic and less exciting.
Martians landed?
Yes.
Wearing Prada suits?
Yes.
Drinking Henry Seltzer?
Yes.
Chewing juicy fruit?
Yes, and?
Your branding here?
Yes, brand.
Your message here?
Yes, and?
A verse about?
Yes.
Your product here?
Yes.
I'm Hersh Redmond.
Yes, and?
I'm a message therapist.
Yes.
And I have a podcast.
Yes, brand.
That's right, that's it.
Yes.
We'll help you fix the world.
Yes.
Or your bottom line.
All right.
Your bottom line.
Get it. I get it. Welcome to the Yes Brand Podcast.
In the hot seat today on Yes Brand is Kimberly Wiefling. Kimberly has an amazing story and trajectory and energy, but just to tell you a little bit about what she does, she helps people achieve what seems impossible. But as she explains it, it's merely difficult. It's not impossible at all. She's the author of the globally popular book, Scrappy Project Management, the 12 predictable and avoidable pitfalls every project faces. She's the founder of Wiefling Consulting. She's the co-founder of the Silicon Valley Alliances. And in fact, her latest book, Turning Ideas into Impact, is an anthology that she created with 15 other Silicon Valley consultants. And she is a physicist by education. She worked for HP for a decade. So she has a lot to offer in that regard. Welcome. Welcome to Yes Brand, Kimberly. It's good to see you again.
Thank you. I love your energy. I'm so looking forward to having this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. Likewise, you mentioned before the show that that your background is a little bit messy by design. If you're not watching this on YouTube, then I can describe for you just a panoply of imagery, pictures, toys, monsters, real
Hersh,
and
those
imagined.
aren't toys. On my tax returns, those are meeting facilitation supplies.
Oh, exactly. Okay. This is a great place to start, which is how do we turn our craziness into cash or into success? And so maybe start with that. Start with a couple of tips about the avoidable pitfalls that every project faces.
Oh, God.
Throw back to
No.
your book.
I was doing product development, project management for mass spectrometers and stuff like that, hardware, software, firmware, complicated stuff. And after a few projects, I noticed that the lessons learned at the end, you have this post-project review, what went wrong, what can we do better next time? The lessons learned meeting was always the same lessons. In fact, there was a website called Project Connections back then where you could download a form where you could just check off what you did wrong again. And I'm like, my God, if you know what you're going to do wrong, why don't you not do it? And so I said, let's fail for new and more exciting reasons, because the top causes of failure. Okay, this is not my research. This is MIT Sloan Business School. Top causes for failure. They studied business teams, 70 teams around the world, and they said over 80% of them failed to achieve their goals. The number one reason was they didn't build trusting relationships. And 2 is they couldn't communicate, solve problems, and make decisions together. And 3 and 4 were combined. No clear shared goals, and individual and team goals weren't aligned. And I'm like, whose job is it to make sure the goals are clear, shared, aligned? There's great communication. We know how to solve problems, make decisions, and we can trust each other. That's totally a failure of leadership. So I wrote Scrappy Project Management, but maybe someday I'll write Scrappy Leadership, because now I'm focusing on Hersh. You have to get a license before you drive a car, right? Take the test. Oh, but you can be the CEO of a company, the executive of any big organization, the manager of a team without knowing anything. And the most basic stuff.
In fact, in some jobs, the less you know, the better.
Oh, say more about that.
In some jobs, what happens with people who fail upwards is that they know so little that they can't get in trouble and can't offend anybody. And so they don't introduce their own ideas, which are only a liability in their view. And so they merely echo the same shit that everybody has always done. And like you pointed out, Kimberly, they fail because if you do the same thing over and it fails, it's going to keep failing. That's called
Yes.
science. And they are never really penalized because they didn't introduce the idea. They merely perpetuated the cycle. And if they figure out into that equation that they can be part of the, not part of the problem in their words, but part of the system, then they keep cycling through and get eventually like a gear. They eventually keep getting pushed upward because they get to the top of the gear and they now get dumped into the next level, and then that goes up and it goes, but it's still broken. It's just functioning.
Well, the other thing I noticed was like those people who would like to be the heroes. Like we celebrate leaders who have these crises they solve, but then I'm like, wait a second, these firefighters carry matches, and I never rewarded heroes. I never rewarded firefighters because I'm like, no, you prevent the fires, and it's been proven this level 5 leadership. I don't know if you've heard of level 5 leadership.
No.
But level 4 leadership is I'm the hero, I'm the firefighter, I'm the champion, save the day. And they're the big ones, but they cause some of the problems. And then the level 5 leader is the person who organizes it, makes sure it's done right, make sure that when things go right, their people get the credit. When things go wrong, they own it and they fix it. But they're less charismatic and less exciting. And so people tend to remember Shackleton, who got his whole crew into a deathly situation by a disaster, but they don't remember all of the other explorers who avoided disaster. And they didn't make a movie about those boring guys.
And there's a saying that for everything that goes wrong, there's a million things that go right that nobody pays any attention to. So you're right. The fact that this guy navigated his crew through a disaster of his own making is basically the thing that's rewarded. Tell me about, but I am fascinated by you and what you do and your background. You probably get this a lot, people asking about your background as a physicist and we talked about it a little off air when we first met, but tell me about it and your trajectory, which is not a one of failing upward, but one of succeeding sideways and then going up. But go ahead, tell us.
Physics, I loved science as a kid, and physics is, in my mind, very challenging, the most complicated, complex thing. When you watch a flock of birds flying, that's physics. That's systems thinking and emergent behavior and very complicated things that look really strange and complicated on the outside often come from simple underpinnings. And physics has helped me understand that what looks really difficult or complicated is really maybe underlying pretty simple. And if you understand it, then it's called physics. If you don't, it's called magic. And plus physics was really hard. I'm smart and I have a genius IQ, blah, blah, blah. But I had to work really hard to get through 7 years of physics, got my master's degree, my bachelor's in chemistry and physics. And now I feel like this really helps me approaching life's challenges and knowing that 100 years ago, this stuff seemed like magic. Now we understand it. And we're still puzzling over things like quantum mechanics and relativity and string theory and all that other stuff. And it's very humbling, too, to know what kind of world we're living in.
I think that perspective is the most amazing gift that we've been given as human beings. And I don't know that animals have perspective. They have it in some form. They can learn lessons, but I don't know that they really get to look at things from another point of view.
There's so many super brilliant people who have been wrong in the past. Yeah. And I say this all the time. Lord Kelvin in 1895 says heavier than air flying machines are impossible. And that's when there were birds. Okay, right. Birds. So whenever somebody tells me something's highly unlikely or darn near impossible, I just go like this. Put your hand up like this, Hersh, and go, bullshit.
Bullshit. Bullshit.
That's right. Put your head up to your mouth and say bullshit. And I'm sorry, but it's really amazing how those of people who say it can't be done should just get out of the way of the people doing it. And it's because the people who have achieved success think what they're doing is right, but sometimes they've just been lucky. And I'd
Yeah.
rather be lucky than smart, okay? But if you just been lucky, it doesn't mean you should keep doing the same thing. Maybe there's stuff you can learn or change or grow.
You know why? You know, the thing with luck is that it's great to be lucky, but we can't replicate luck because it's luck. But we
Yep.
can replicate experiments that are successful. And I'm not a
Yes.
scientist, certainly, but it's one of the things I've always loved about science is that it makes sense of stuff that is otherwise just completely random.
Yeah, there's often underlying solutions that are mysterious or not understood yet. And also, the other thing is, I live in Silicon Valley, so I'm surrounded by lots of failures, but here we call failures experiments or prototypes, right? And I'm from this family of people that's, oh, you say it can't be done, get out of our way. We're going to jump off the cliff. And while we're falling and screaming, we're going to grow wings and learn how to fly. And yeah, it's scary and anxiety inducing. And if you don't want to do that, I totally understand it. But there is a place for that in our world to explore, to iterate. It's called design thinking. You don't
Yeah.
have to know everything before you take the first step.
Yeah. And we can also consider failures write-offs. We can call them write-offs as well. There's a benefit to experimentation and failure. One of the things that you talk about is helping organizations solve global problems profitably.
Right.
Let's get into that a little bit, the profitability of solutions.
Can you imagine? Amazing, right? If you find an organization that says, oh, sure, we can clean up the plastic in the ocean and use it for fuel and burn it in a way that doesn't pollute the earth, I think there's a market for that. Or do you know that consumers are willing to pay 10 or 15% more for a product if they believe that it's eco-friendly, sustainable, green? And if your company doesn't commit to sustainable future, like the World Business Council for Sustainable Development is an organization with 230, at least at this point, 230 of the biggest companies in the world, about 25% of Earth's GDP. And there are all the big company names. And they said, hey, there's no stock price or profit in a world that's falling apart and people can't live, we can't exist. So it's not profitable to destroy the planet. And businesses know that. And I strongly believe that businesses that act in a sustainable way will discover not only that they will preserve their business, but they can actually expand it.
Yeah. You have to say to them, listen, first, forget that it's sustainable. Forget
Yeah.
that we're doing something good. Let's just look at it from the bottom line. Let's go from there. And then the fact that you're doing good will sit better with you because you will realize you're not losing anything.
Plus the worker shortage, the skilled worker shortage in this world, like US and Japan, where I work most of my time with Japanese companies, there's almost a 20% worker shortage in Japan and also Germany. And in the US, even 3 or 4%. And if you are a company that can't attract workers because the generation of workers says, no, I don't want to work for that crazy company, or I don't want to contribute to that destruction of our planet. How are you going to stay in business if you can't attract and retain the workers you need to do your jobs?
Now, it makes me, hearing you talk about Japan and the United States and working globally, internationally, I can't help but wonder what your clients, let's say, and what some companies that you're not working with are thinking in terms of it's easy for us to sit where we sit and say, it only seems logical to build a sustainable future, right? That's just my thinking, but I'm not a titan of industry. If someone is a titan of industry, someone is running a huge global company, what are they thinking? The future,
Yeah.
or what is the goal, if not that?
So Japanese companies are different. Like in the US, it's very much stock market, stock price driven. In Japan, companies exist to support society. And then, of course, they need to make a profit so they can stay in business. Now, they're a little bit surprised when they find out, how money-centric companies in the US are sometimes. But for Japan, they understand the concept of a purpose beyond profit, a mission that matters. They exist for their stakeholders, not just their customers, but the communities in which they do business and their people who work for them and their families. And the one company I worked for many years, and it's not a secret, is Kuraray. They were founded by a guy many years ago, 60 years ago, who said to do what others cannot do for people and the planet. And that was way before the
Wow.
sustainability movement.
And what does that corporation do?
Oh, what did they do? They make plastic pellets and carbon and materials. They make materials that could be considered some
Pollutants.
destructive for the planet. So
Yeah.
now they're working on, okay, how do we make polymers from biosourced raw materials that aren't food? Because you don't want to turn food into plastic because people need food. And also, how could we figure out ways to make our plastics biodegradable or sustainable or repurpose or upcycling? There are a lot of amazing questions to be answered, and material science is ripe and ready for some real breakthroughs because plastic is very useful for our planet. You go to the hospital, you want to try to go to the hospital and go through any procedure without having plastic, a little bit dangerous. Like the whole sanitation stuff, really.
Yeah.
So we need to find ways to integrate plastic in a sustainable way, in a cycle that works. For the future, right? It's not just about what I use today and toss it on the street and it floats into the ocean and kills some fish. We've got to figure out ways to integrate plastic into our ecosystem in a circular way. That's called the circular economy.
Yeah. In other words, if something isn't biodegradable, how do we convert it? How do we convert it for use? What are some of the advances, some of the things that are going on in that arena?
Oh my gosh, there's all kinds of things like, hey, certain kinds of little tiny microorganisms that can eat plastic. But I just go back to very simple things. If I had to solve it today, I'd say, okay, gather it all up, it's fuel, put it into a furnace that is adjusted to make sure it doesn't pollute when it burns things, and just burn the stuff. Instead of burning oil, you can burn the plastic and you can get energy from it. I don't know. Why would you throw it out? It's fuel. Of course, you need to have the new technology of how to burn things in a way that doesn't make the air dirtier and doesn't contribute to the problem, but that can be done. And then there's CO2 grabbing plants that can be used like algae, or there was a facility created in Iceland a couple years ago to demonstrate this carbon capture stuff, and you can grab CO2 out of the air and put it somewhere for a long time or forever. And Airbus goes to them and says, oh, how much would it cost for you to build enough of those plants to cancel out our whole negative impact of our whole fleet of airplanes that we're going to produce this year? And so they go, yeah, 150 billion. Of course, Airbus says, sure. This is so funny because I'm a scientist. This climate issue, it's not a problem. It's an expense waiting for budget approval. There is all kinds of technology available to adjust the Earth's temperature, the CO2, and all that stuff. The people want to argue about, oh, it's climate change. Is it made by humans or not? It doesn't matter. It won't matter what caused it if Earth becomes unlivable. The dinosaurs didn't cause the Earth to become unlivable, but they all died.
And that's a good lesson for us because the dinosaurs didn't know about blame either, but they died. So knowing about blame isn't going to help us here. Now, I love the way you put that it's an expense, it's a budget item waiting to be approved. We're coming up on this week, the COP summit, the climate summit in Azerbaijan. And it's interesting because a lot of the people who host and attend are by definition the biggest polluters because they're wanting to either demonstrate or be seen as contributing to the solution, not the problem in some way. What's your take on that conference and what happens there?
Oh, I'm actually much more excited about the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, WBCSD.org. They kicked off, I think, at Stanford University in 2010, and my colleague facilitated that. The members of that organization are the CEOs of the company They started with 100 company members. They grew it. Now they're 230. And these organizations are for-profit businesses who really want to make a profit, and they are working together to say, hey, look, we got to do this in a way that we can make a profit 5 years from now, 10 years from now, not just this week. And these companies, like, for example, ExxonMobil is thinking about perhaps joining. Maybe all the other oil companies are in there. All these companies, there's like a co-opetition, like when the genetic code was sequenced. All these companies couldn't do it by themselves, but together they all cooperated and sequenced the human. Then they patented it, then they made it public so nobody else could patent it. And they said, let's not compete on understanding the problem. Let's compete on curing the diseases. And I think that's what these companies who have joined WBCSD or are thinking of it are going, you know what? Let's cooperate to create an ecosystem where we can make profit sustainably. And then let's compete with our customers, our products, and our services. There's nothing wrong with that. So I think I don't understand anything related to government or politics or United Nations, because for me, whatever you do and the punishment or the rewards don't line up. But in business, if you do stupid things in business, you go out of business. Like, hey, can we talk about Motorola, Nokia, or Palm Pilot? For crying out loud, these companies were very successful. And they're like, no, don't worry your pretty little head about that. Oh my gosh, Motorola had 30% market share even in Japan. Nokia killed them. Then Nokia had over 50% global market share. 7 years later, it was like 2%. And they just couldn't change in a way that could keep them profitable and successful. I don't know. What do you think about that, Mr. Brand?
I always see stuff from the brand perspective. And when I think about governments, I think about governments that some of the people recognize that they are also brands, and some of them think that there's something more than a brand or a corporation. And in fact, there's no divine that's given to a government or a system, right? Government system. Those are just systems. They're supposed to be problem solvers and administrators. And that's the same way a company runs. If it's profitable, if it gets good results the way it's being run, then it gets rewarded in the public sphere and in its own process. So I think that governments have the same problem that a corporation has in terms of how they communicate about their role, their role in the world. And that sometimes confuses us because we think of governments as having an immense power over millions of people, but so do corporations. So does a corporation.
Yeah, a corporation, I can vote with my money. You know what? And if a corporation doesn't give me good products and services or behaves in ways that I despise, I use a different company. I hear about some huge company and the founder or the executives are jerks or they're anti-woman or something. Hey, I changed a different company. I vote with my dollars. And it's also, if I see that organizations, there's never going to be women leaders, a bunch of investors have realized that companies that have women in executive roles and even on the board level make more money, like 20% more profit. I love data. Catalyst organization has studied this. And so some investment companies will not invest in a company if you don't have more women represented at the executive level, not because they care about the women's issues, mind you, because they know they'll make more money if they invest in a different company that does.
Well, like we were saying, it's the idea of bottom lining things it's not a bad idea. We're talking about good outcomes. So now where do you see your brand? The Kimberly Wiefling brand. It's obviously, here's the thing. I promise my clients that they're going to be incomparable because I believe that everybody's unique and I believe that every brand is incomparable. But you also have a truly incomparable spirit and a unique spirit. So she's holding it. Kimberly's holding up what do you call it? A wacky face?
Oh, there are little emojis that you can get, cardboard emojis that you can hold up when you're on one of these video calls. And You can express
Right.
yourself beyond words.
Right. And you don't have to make noise. It's like doing the
Yeah,
jazz hands to
that's right.
applaud.
Yeah.
You're like holding
Yeah.
up the emoji.
Yeah. Yeah. But you're asking
Tell me.
about my brand, right? Because I have been told, even recently, oh, you're too weird. You're too strange. Oh, you somewhat unprofessional. I'm like, yeah, guess what? I'm a fish. If you want to climb a tree, hire a squirrel. I am not going to turn into a squirrel. I am not attempting to be a great match for every possible customer. I want to find people who want a scrappy dose of Kimberly. I'm looking for people who are like, hey, we have a choice, change or die. Woohoo! Let's do it, man. I don't need people who are like, oh, let's have a big six consulting firm come in and do things in a politically correct and socially acceptable way. No, I am going to come in there and say what needs to get done. All right, let's work together. I'm not going to fix you. You're going to transform yourself. And if people don't really want to change, one of my ex-bosses, the guy who I worked for full time, and then he hired me as a consultant several different places. He said, Kimberly, you know what? Nobody should hire you unless they're really committed to changing. And I think about 1 or 2 days a week of you is about enough. So that's why I'm like, sure, mother forklift, shut the front door, back the truck up. Ain't nobody needs a 40-hour-a-week dose of Kimberly.
I don't think any of us, I think that most of us don't even want a 40-hour dose of ourselves. And that's why human interaction is so important. That's why engagement is so important. And during COVID, oh, this is a perfect segue.
Yeah.
I was going to say during COVID, we had to go underground. During certain periods, we felt disconnected from others, but we also found ways to connect. We connected via Zoom. We connected via groups on Zoom. You have a way of connecting with people in person, in life, that's very important to you as well. You want to describe that a little bit?
Well, for me, of course, I'm here to build community. Like in my personal life during COVID, we hosted over 500 daily virtual happy hours on Zoom with my mom and a bunch of friends. 508. Okay. My mom came to 500 of them. And then we said, oh crap, people are dying of loneliness. So we had an outdoor patio and we could do risk managed dinner at a distance. We had 200 dinners at our home in 2 years. From June 2020 until the summer of 2022, we opened up our patio to a limited number of people who weren't bragging about how they were endangering themselves and others. And we would have posted safety guidelines. And we didn't have any community transmission in 200 dinners with gathering 8 people, dinner at a distance again. And then we do musical events at our home every month or two. We have something outside. And when people come together around great jazz music or Brazilian or soul, or they're listening to wonderful music together, they don't care who you voted for. They're just having some fun.
And you make it sound very simple, and in a way it is, but it also circles back around to this era of possibility, this concept of possibility. I was thinking today, I was walking my dogs, and they're both very little, but one of them is new, and it can be very difficult to walk 2 dogs at the same time because they want to walk together, but they also want to go apart. And it's like they can't figure out which way they're walking. So in any event, I was thinking to myself, you guys could walk together the whole way. It's improbable that you will, but it's not impossible. Nothing's impossible. You could definitely do it. Exactly. So I think that if we can leave the audience with a thought, I want to give you the last word. And I hope you will come back on the podcast because there's always more to talk about. And I know you're going to have another book. What's your latest book is what? Tell me the name again.
Oh, that's the one about a bunch of my buddies, Silicon Valley Alliances.
Oh,
yeah, and unfortunately, people don't have time to read books anymore. But so I'm not sure what I did start a little mini podcast. I have 3 small 5 to 7 minute episodes. I'll be inspired by you and see if I can get that going. But I would like to leave people with the thought of what seems impossible may be merely difficult. And if you want to ask yourself, what's possible? What seems impossible, but if it were possible, would transform me, my life, my work, my business, our world for the better, that will open doors for you. And especially when something bad happens, like when COVID happens or some negative thing, I always try to find the diamonds hidden in the dog poop. I go, okay, what does this crap make possible that would not have been possible? And then boom, manifest the possibilities from that. Hey, I completely virtualized my business during COVID, made the same amount of revenue in 2021 as 2019 without ever putting on my pants. Okay.
I love it.
Find the treasures hidden in the tragedies.
All right.
If you liked the show,
Yes, and
it worked for you,
yes, then.
subscribe and leave a
Yes, friend.
5-star review.
Yes, friend.
Tell all your friends.
Yes, friend.
Get your branding here.
Yes, friend.
Get your branding here.
Yes, friend.
Did I make it clear?